A gleaming BMW sports car raced down the track. The speakers blared old rock, drowned out only by the roar of the engine. Incoming call. A young man's face appeared on the electronic panel. The man in his 40s slowed down a bit and turned up the volume. Yes, Miguel, what happened? Have the partners finally confirmed the delivery date of the object? Andres Ramos, the date is confirmed. On the 23rd at 12 o'clock sharp, said the assistant. Good. Great. I'm on my way to the office. How's it going there? Everything is fine. We will finish the pizza now and prepare the papers. I understand. I'll be right there. The man pressed a red button on the screen and turned the sound back to full volume. Only 1 week to go until the 23rd. I have to get my family together. Okay, a wife won't be hard to find, but a daughter. Or a son? Andrew was deep in thought. Snowflakes began to fall from the sky. I had to slow down as the windshield wipers wobbled obediently. The car obediently swerved off the track and the roar of the engine changed to a quiet purr. The snow was falling harder and the businessman had to get closer to the steering wheel to make sure he didn't hit anyone. He looked carefully along the sidewalk, alert for inattentive pedestrians, when he spotted a girl selling dairy products on the side of the road. Ah, that's what I need. I'm going to get milk for these knuckleheads before they get a belly full of pizza. The car backed up against the curb. The saleswoman looked about 18, maybe 19, no more. She had snowflakes on the scarf she wore tied to her head. Smiling sweetly, the girl told Andres about the products. The man could not bear to see her cold. She was there in her fur coat, but the frosty air tickled her nose unpleasantly. And she had a simple coat, synthetic for sure. And wrap it all up for me, the man circled his finger around the small counter. The girl was momentarily taken aback. You must have a big family, right? I'll pack everything quickly. A shy smile crossed her cold blue lips. Aha! Family. At that moment Andrew realized. He took a closer look at the girl's face. Gray eyes, strands of blonde hair covered by a scarf. And this could be the way out. Dear lady, I do not want to scare you. She continued folding products, but turned to the buyer. I have some business meetings where I need to look like a family man, and I have everything but family. Maybe you can help me. I'll pay, of course. The girl looked at him with wide eyes. Her cheeks reddened and she lowered her eyes to the floor in embarrassment. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't. He chose his words carefully and tied the package of sour cream as slowly, as if he were walking on the edge of a cliff. Oh, you probably misunderstood me. I'm not a maniac, what a fool. Andres ran to the parked car and hurriedly took out his passport. Here, look, this is my passport. You can take a picture of it and give it to someone you trust. He handed the leather-covered document to the girl. It will be only for a week, just a couple of hours a day. Well, even if it's only for a few hours, I think I can, because my mother is sick and I'm taking care of her, so I can't be gone for long. You're really going to help me. What's your name? Camila. Andres. Camila, it's a deal. I have to go now, but I'll call you to discuss the details then. Andres took numerous bags with products in both hands. And, if you don't mind, I should go buy you some things suitable for you. You can keep them later. I don't need them, laughed Andrew. He was very pleased with himself. It had been so easy to solve the problem he had been suffering from for months, ever since the negotiations for the branch had begun. He felt a rush of encouragement. A heated steering wheel is the best invention of mankind. I stood in the cold for only 10 minutes, but I already need to warm up. In my youth it was all different. The car drove slowly down the avenue, and the man's thoughts moved to his adolescence. I had nothing at all then. But he did have warm clothes. His parents would never allow him to go around in clothes below his status. His blood, at an elite economics university, had to make a decent impression. Worthy of his family's status. But that meant nothing at the time. That wasn't what his youthful soul wanted. Neither a bank account with 7 zeros, nor a luxurious house, where in the end he only chose his living room as his home. Then he dreamed of lofty things, faith, justice and, of course, love. He remembered the soft scent of lavender and soap from her long blonde hair. Involuntarily, the man took a deep breath. His heart squeezed painfully. Andrew himself didn't realize how he had gotten to the office. The man tossed the car keys to the valet. Yes, now he could afford anything he wanted. He could even not work for a few years, and not limit himself to anything. But so what? Youth was gone, no one to take care of but his employees. He coughed, snapping back to reality. Contract. A smart contract, well thought out. That's the thing to think about now. So that no clever lawyer could get his hands on it. The afternoon was spent again in reflection. Andrew looked at the falling snow and remembered his youth. The whiskey in the glass burned his throat. He walked over to the picture window and brushed an obscene layer of dust off the coffee table. He put the glass between the neglected Rolexes, as if they were a plastic trinket, and the ashtray full of cigarette butts. A cigarette slipped easily from the crumpled pack and the man opened a small slit in the sliding door with a slight movement. Along with the frosty air came into the room the screams of children from next door. The building was barely visible because of the falling snow, but that didn't stop the screams at all. Quickly finishing his cigarette, the man hurried to close the door and plunged into the silence with pleasure. Yeah, better that than hearing all that screeching from morning to night. At least he had the freedom of choice. She took another sip and grimaced, spilling the rest into the pot of wilted bonsai on the floor. Tossing his damp robe on the king-size leather sofa, he sank wearily into the soft embrace of the bed. He might as well have gone to the bedroom, but that room was boring him. He hadn't slept there once since Carla had left. She was a homebody. He closed his eyes and remembered how tidy the place had been then. It had been good times. The smell of home cooking filled the house. In the closets were neatly folded clean sheets. The bedroom was used for its intended purpose. Andrew fell into a pleasant sleep. Dawn was barely breaking through the window when Andres opened his eyes. After the usual 20 steps to the bathroom, he looked at himself in the mirror. In the pale lamplight, his wrinkles looked deeper, making him 10 years older. It was as if he were already in his 60s. The time glowed on the electronic surface of the mirror. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. All the morning routines went on automatically. Over the years, the ritual had become automatic, and half an hour later Andres would open the door to the delivery man with breakfast already prepared. As the coffee pot whirred and chugged, brewing the coffee, the man decided it would be a good idea to add cream. Greasy, but sometimes you can. From the depths of the fridge a solitary dried zucchini and a few jars of sauce returned his gaze. A row of mineral water bottles huddled against the open door, and there was the cream hidden behind them. The man picked up a Tetra Pak and took a small sip. Damn! He hastily spit out the bitter liquid. He should order the services of a cleaning lady after all. The very idea of shopping made Andres terribly uncomfortable. He didn't want to loiter around the mall, but there was nothing he could do. Such a complicated matter could not be entrusted to an assistant, and Camila's clothes would undoubtedly give her away as a simple girl. Even now, she stood there in slightly stretched jeans with white stripes down the front, tucked into rough boots. Underneath the unbuttoned synthetic jacket was a fuzzy gray sweater. He took off his hat and waved to Andrew. "Hi Camila, are you ready?" "Ready, Andres." The girl lowered her eyes. She was probably ashamed to call him by his first name. He was old enough to be her father. "Don't worry. This will just be a theatrical performance. And I'm your partner on the set." The man raised his finger, underlining his involvement in the great art. Slow, rhythmic music drifted through the mall, causing shoppers to pace endlessly among glittering window displays and miles of colorful costumes, like ants caught in a death trap. The escalators finally reached the top floor. Here were the most expensive boutiques, and often less crowded than on the lower floors. Andrew cherished the thought that very soon he would be able to sit in a comfortable armchair, and a nice woman would bring him a cup of coffee. And so it was. Once they entered the first store and explained the reason for their visit, Andres sat down in a comfortable leather armchair and now he only had to rate the outfits. The process went well. Camila dutifully tried on everything that was brought to her, and soon the cardboard shopping bags multiplied near Andres. He had to change a few stores so that the brands were different. Andres knew the community he was going to all too well. Those shark-minded rich kids knew all the new collections and, if they suspected anything wrong, they would quickly spot the deception. Then the contract he had been trying to get for years would slip through his fingers. Camila carefully picked up another black velvet bag decorated with silver scribbles. Andres nodded in satisfaction to the saleswoman, confirming that it also needed to be packed. When he was finally certain that the girl would absolutely be dressed as a rich shark, his heart was relieved. The time had come to finalize the details. A small dark restaurant on the same floor was perfect. Camila, look, there's going to be a business meeting, but my partners are still tradition-loving, they uphold family traditions. So you will be my daughter. Tell me a little about yourself, so I know what kind of story to invent. The man took a sip of his tea. Yes, there is not much to tell. Now I work as a milkmaid. My mother got sick and I had to look for a job near her house to take care of her. And when I have time, I sell my products. Think of it as a small business, the girl blushed and giggled. Did you go to school? Or maybe you enrolled? Andrew had a strange feeling that the girl's speech was too soft and correct. No accents, no slang. Milkmaids didn't talk like that. Yes, I actually enrolled in art history, but I had to take a year off for now. I hope to be able to go back to school next year. Wow, good for you. In fact, you look just like me, the man smiled. Why don't you have a family? I should probably find out more about you, too, so I'm prepared. Well, she doesn't need that information, of course. Okay, I'll have to tell her to relax a little. Well, I used to have a woman I loved, but that was a long time ago, and then business, work, somehow I didn't have time. And now I'm old and they do not love me. So you're a lone wolf? You could say that, smiled the businessman. During the time spent in the restaurant, Andres got Camila to talk a little and her worries took a back seat. The girl's manner of speaking was pleasant and possessed a slight irony. Their conversation flowed easily and that gave him hope that the deal would be successful in the future. However, talking to a young and charming girl in this unusual way was new to the man. It was not the same as handing out tasks to subordinates. From all the fuss, Andrew felt a migraine coming on. Of course it would be nice to take Camila home himself, but he had no energy left. God bless whoever invented the cab. Andres was relieved to see the red taillights of a yellow car driving away. That night, a headache kept Andres awake. He tried to find pills to relieve the attack, but he ran out of them. As usual. At the most unnecessary moment. He closed the cap of the empty pill container and threw it in the trash. At first she wanted to call her assistant, who could bring her what she needed, but at the last moment she remembered that he had recently had a baby. Calling him now, in the middle of the night, would be too much. Andrew flipped through the contact list on his phone and discarded it. A big list of women's numbers, and no one to text. Either they were sleeping or having fun like they had once had with him. Maybe Carla would have come to lend him a hand. But that would be too low. He remembered the tear-streaked face when he had told her he didn't love her. The pain squeezed his temples even tighter. The old fool. Andrew picked up the phone and quickly dialed the number of the pay clinic. When you have money, you can afford to be alone. Barely 10 minutes later, the kind nurses gave Andres an invigorating injection and the pain subsided. Tonight you will sleep like a baby, smiled the young nurse. That's right, as a 45-year-old baby. The car rolled silently down the unpaved road. Camila saw the car and waved. Andres responded mechanically. Behind the girl was a crooked little house covered with snow. Now it looked unnatural against that backdrop. Like a shiny lollipop against the backdrop of an industrial area. The wheels squealed as she braked along with her pretty, light-colored, low-heeled boots. The girl pushed back her straightened blonde locks and climbed into the car. Andres stood still for a moment, watching her. Makeup neat and discreet, hair shiny, manicure elegant. The clothes completed the outfit. Camila looked fresh and beautiful. Camila, you look great. Thank you, Andres, I am very worried. Not Andres, it's Daddy. The man raised his finger, reminding me of the great art. Yes, Daddy, laughed the little girl. Everything will be fine, I'm sure. Well, just a reminder. Mom is in the mountains skiing. The roads are blocked and she couldn't come. And you're staying with me, Daddy dearest. Getting ready for your winter sessions. I honestly don't think anyone is going to ask too many questions, but just in case. You know. Camila nodded firmly and waved her hand on her forehead, indicating that she was ready to follow instructions. I was wondering if you could call me Camila. That's what my mother usually calls me. I like the sound of it. The wheels turned slowly and the car set off for a day full of adventure. Holding Camila by the arm, the man entered the small room. The stage was dotted with red velvet curtains and in front were tables. There was a large one in the center and several smaller ones on the sides. The helpful manager held out his hands cheerfully when he saw Andres. He shook his hand vigorously and bowed his head politely, introducing him to Camila. He led them to a group of people standing slightly apart. The most crucial moment. Camila squeezed his hand tighter and Andres patted it encouragingly. The introduction to the partners went even better than he thought it would. The men greeted each other respectfully and introduced themselves to the girl. We have some things to discuss now, go and have a look, Cammy. It's okay. Dad. Camilla's voice was louder than usual. She doesn't like to go out much, said Andres in a low voice as he watched his fictitious daughter walk confusedly towards the young people crowded in the opposite corner. She is lovely, the tall dark man with glasses looked at his companion. Ours could have been quieter, perhaps she would have slept better, laughed the man. Yeah, don't expect good things from these kids. Andres imagined Camila as a young deer wandering into a clearing already surrounded by small, toothy predators, ready to pounce. But turning around furtively, he saw that the youngsters were focused on their phones, their light reflecting off their grumpy faces. Camila sat down in one of the free seats. Good, you can relax. The meeting went well and soon the most important, but no less boring, part of the meeting came to an end with the presentation and reports. The presenter received his applause for the work done and the staff removed the presentation material from the stage. Andres sighed with satisfaction. All that remained was the buffet. A crowd of waiters, in perfectly pressed suits, flooded the room. Bubbly champagne in tall glasses rattled on their trays as they approached each guest. The tables were laden with appetizers, canapés, fruit, cheese, and many other delicacies. Camila shyly approached Andres. Champagne? The waiter leaned over her. Oh, no thanks, I don't drink. The girl's cheeks blushed. Andrew, how did you manage to raise such an angel? The man with the glasses and his short friend looked at each other. She looks just like her mother, it's a pity she couldn't join us. If you had seen her, you would have known who she was, it wasn't the first time Andres lied. If not, how he would have built his empire. He winked at the one with the glasses. His speech sounded so convincing that there was no doubt it was true. Yes, you are already one person for two. From behind the men came the shriek of a woman. In the corner, where the children of the other businessmen had settled, there was a great commotion. The waiter hurried to wipe up the champagne spilled on the table. A girl in a long, floor-length blue dress was reprimanding him, pointing out that the dress cost more than her annual salary. And that, if the champagne fell on her, it would be very bad for her. His mother hurried over to the girl. An elegant blonde in a beautiful gold dress. The brilliance of her attire was eclipsed only by the diamond pendant she wore on her chest. Oh, those are mine, the dark-haired man with glasses sighed tiredly and, after emptying his glass in one gulp, headed in the direction of the conflict. In the evening, Andres uncorked a bottle of collector's cognac, saved for a special occasion. The tea-colored drink filled a cognac glass. Stone cooling cubes went in there, too. Today the day was going very well. Andres was very pleased with himself. Camilla had done even better than he had expected. Wow, what a good girl. She didn't get eaten by sharks. Andres remembered the first time he had met the children of rich parents. He himself had been one. His parents, big businessmen, often took him to such banquets, and he always felt like a show dog. He found it difficult to find common ground with his peers. All they did was list their parents' accomplishments and brag about who had the most expensive things and who went to which spa. The boy heard these same conversations so often that they bored him to death. The cognac pleasantly warmed his throat. The taste was splendid. I wonder what Camila is doing now. Andres dismissed the thought, shaking his head. He turned the phone over in his hand and opened the contacts. Hi. Do you want to come visit me? I seem to have missed you. Calculating his chances of success, he dialed the names of several women on the list at once and hit send. He got a response from only one girl. A burly brunette he'd had a brief fling with a couple of years ago. Only if you're ready for something serious. Hey, and the night could have ended differently. Andrew hung up the phone, lit a cigarette and walked over to the window. The door opened softly. Squeals and laughter could be heard coming from the courtyard next door. Judging by the shouting, a family was playing snowballs. For the next meeting, Andres dressed especially solemn. The event was to take place in one of the best restaurants in town. The room was fully rented for his meeting with the partners. His hair was slicked back, a black bow tie was worn at his neck and a tailored black suit fit him perfectly, hiding his soft belly from prying eyes. Andrew coughed and pulled back the hem of his jacket. Everything looked perfect. He glanced again in the tall mirror. An executive car was already waiting for him in the courtyard. A neatly dressed driver opened the door for his passenger. After picking up Camila, the car glided smoothly through the city and stopped at the entrance to a restaurant with bright lights. Andres helped Camila out of the car and, holding the girl by the elbow, followed the receptionist who greeted them. Cammy, you did very well, my colleagues were delighted with you. Was I really? I was so worried. I didn't sleep all the next night. I thought I was boring them. I couldn't hold a conversation. Don't worry. All those spoiled brats are like big kids. There's not much to say to them. If you don't know what to say, just say your dad is richer. Laughing, the couple entered the room. The restaurant was decorated with a magnificent, huge Christmas tree. It burned solemnly in front of a floor-to-ceiling window, with snow falling behind it. On the opposite side was a grand piano, before which a man dressed in a tuxedo sat playing cozy classical music. Well, you know what to do. Aha! Camila modestly greeted everyone present and went to the Christmas tree, where some of the wives and children were already gathered. Andres was pleased to see that Camila was having a conversation with someone in the group. She soon disappeared into the crowd, apparently heading for the window. The first hour, as usual, was spent negotiating. The men settled into large leather armchairs around a mahogany coffee table and discussed the details of the deal. Some smoked cigars. Andres turned them down. He remembered coughing the rest of the day after the last time. No, this entertainment was not for him. The conversation returned to the realm of family values. The men shared their thoughts on the fact that family positions a man as a respectable and trustworthy person. You are absolutely right. Andres nodded with complicity, remembering his father's many adventures. If a man can keep his family together, what a business awaits him. Yes, that's what we're talking about, the men nodded. Finally, the business part was over and everyone was invited to their tables. Camila was elegant in a long black dress. The sleeves were tight around her slender arms, covering her wrists. A black velvet handbag with silver curls completed the look perfectly. Andrew was pleased to see how well it suited her. He was sincerely glad that the girl kept such beautiful and quality clothes. Waitresses in white gloves strolled around the tables and brought more and more dishes for the guests. Soon the table was filled with all kinds of delicacies. Andres would catch Camila's questioning look from time to time as to what it was, and would whisper in her ear whether it was worth trying or not. Soon they switched to talking only with their eyes. "We haven't been back to that branch since," the bespectacled man's family laughed, and chuckles of approval rolled around the table. Camila turned around to look at the baked snails. Andres narrowed his eyes with a disgusted look on his face. The girl let out a giggle and kept looking for something to try. Glasses clinked. The guests tasted different dishes and reminisced about life's anecdotes, sharing their plans for the end-of-year festivities. "Camila, how are you going to celebrate?" The man adjusted his glasses and the whole table looked curiously at the girl. "And me. We." The girl's voice trembled at the unexpected attention. "I'll be studying for my exams." "Yes, Daddy." She froze with a piece of chocolate dessert in her hand. Andrew froze at the sight of a piece of jewelry sliding down the sleeve of her dress. A silver bracelet with fine lines glittered on her wrist. And he knew that bracelet. "Dad," a worried voice brought the businessman out of his trance. Yes, Cammy, it's true, this year we are staying at home. Camila has exams to study for." "And what do you study, Camila?" "Art history." "Wow, that must be very interesting. I just..." And then... He could only hear fragments of sentences. He was immersed in his thoughts, but they didn't want to coalesce into something complete, only to circle like kites around the bracelet. "That's impossible. I bought it myself at the time. And then they couldn't find it. Neither could she. I could hardly wait for the meeting to end." He wanted to escape into the frosty air, to disappear from the table, from the room. But the damned etiquette chained him to his chair. As the evening drew to a close, he said goodbye to his associates and hurried off with Camila under his arm to the luxury car. "Camila, where did you get that bracelet?" "My mother gave it to me when I was little. I thought it would go well with the bag." She looked at him confused. "Mom?" Andres turned away from the window. "Well, yes, Mom. What is it? Why do you ask?" The frightened girl, even in the poorly lit car, could see how the man turned white. "Many years ago, I bought this bracelet. It was handmade. There was not a second like it." The street lamps of houses and cars flew past the window, the bright lights of evening city signs flickered, all blended together in a huge kaleidoscope of color that threw a man into memories of his youth. It was as if they were no longer streetlights, but his years were passing him by. Andrew remembered himself as a sophomore at an elite economics college. He liked higher mathematics, and that day he was running to class when he bumped into her. He tripped and collided with a pretty girl in the parallel group. She almost hit him in the leg. As an apology, she agreed to go with him to the bakery after class. What did he take with him then? A chocolate cake and a milkshake, I think. Yes. She smeared some chocolate and the young man couldn't take his eyes off her. He stared at her angelic face, her blonde hair, and didn't even dare to sigh. The car stopped in front of Camila's house. I'm leaving," said or asked the girl with a slight apprehension, opening the door. "Camila, I'll come to see you tomorrow afternoon. Will you introduce me to Mom?" "It's all right." His voice sounded unsure. Arriving home, Andres hurried to get the butterfly off his back. It seemed to squeeze his neck like a boa, getting tighter and tighter. Next, he took off his tight jacket. He couldn't breathe. The man hurried to the back room. It was practically empty. Some boxes with work documents, drawings, estimates were stored there. He pushed the boxes aside and tossed the crumbling folders aside. There it was. The precious box lay in its place. He slowly lifted the lid. His hands were shaking. He gently pushed aside a small bouquet of dried flowers, lifted the rectangle wrapped in soft cloth and carefully unfolded it. There were only a few old photographs, faded by time. In one of them, a young Andrew, in shorts and a summer t-shirt, was hugging a blonde girl by the waist in front of a river. A lump rose in the man's throat. He placed the photograph reverently on the ground beside him. In the next photo, the girl was laughing. He photographed her while she was making scones. Her clothes were covered in flour. Andrew smiled bitterly. He remembered how she had thrown flour at him after that photo, and they ended up sweeping flour from the kitchen for several more days after a brief game. The second photo is light on the previous one. In his trembling hands, a single photo remained. In it there was no one. Just the empty riverbank. Tears rolled down the man's cheeks. They pinched his freshly shaven face and lodged in his wrinkles. He felt a tightness in his chest. Andrew could no longer be there. He refolded the contents of the box with holy reverence in his eyes, placed a small bouquet of dried flowers on the soft cloth, and put the box away elsewhere. The boxes and papers lying around didn't bother him. He merely turned off the light and headed for the shower. The open bottle of brandy was glad to be remembered. It burned his throat easily and poured bitter poison down his chest. Tonight they didn't need an intermediary in the form of a glass. Andrew took an avid sip and tore at her throat. He sat in a plush robe on the living room floor. The fluffy carpet barely reflected the dim light of the night lamp. Andrew leaned his head back on the couch. An eerie silence reigned in the apartment. It literally deafened him. He felt terribly lonely. Now I could die and no one would miss me. At least a thief would come. Hello? Is anyone here? He shouted in the dark hallway. It's just you and me. Another sip burned his lips. Andres woke up when the sun was already shining brightly on the other side of the window. What he liked most about expensive drinks was the absence of a hangover. If in his youth he had drunk all the cheap cognac he could afford, he would have a cast-iron head today. He already automatically ordered breakfast and went about his morning rituals. Shower, teeth, combing. Everything as it had been for the past 20 years. An enthusiastic delivery man delivered his breakfast. The coffee pot hissed as he brewed the coffee. The breakfast was invigorating. The remnants of sleep disappeared as if by magic. Sunlight reflected off the fluffy snowdrifts and flooded the kitchen with light. Andrew looked around as if he had new eyes. How could he have set the house up like that? The whole kitchen was cluttered with unfamiliar things. Dust was everywhere. In front of the large two-chamber refrigerator were stains of unknown origin. He remembered that it had been at least a year since he had last invited a cleaner. How time flew by. Either the coffee or the sun, or both, had awakened a surge of enthusiasm in the man's soul. He wrote to the manager of a trusted agency and called for domestic workers. The day promised to be a good one. He felt his life was about to change. It would change for the better. He found the maids already dressed in a three-piece wool winter suit. He wanted to get to Camila's house as soon as possible. It was approaching noon on the clock and the trip was a long one. He coordinated the household chores. He sketched out the approximate menu he would like to have cooked for him and left wishes to do the shopping. He had locked the file room in advance. The icy wind burned my face. The bright light dazzled my eyes. The car had already warmed up and was ready to hit the road. When the gate finally opened, Andrew saw that the driveway was blocked by repair services. A pipe had burst because of freezing and men in orange jumpsuits were shouting and free-speeching at each other, digging the manhole through which puffs of white steam were coming out. Yes, that's how it was. There was no point in arguing with fate. He couldn't go around them. He turned the key in the ignition and shut off the engine. The cab didn't arrive until 40 minutes later. During that time, Andres became quite agitated and even thought about walking away. The cigarettes were melting in the pack. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel when, at last, the driver stopped at the door. Happy as a 20-something, he ran to the car and waved to the chauffeur for some reason. Andrew jumped into the back seat and looked nervously at his house. The huge brick-walled box looked fake to him. He didn't feel it was his home. From the outside, it looked to him like he was just passing through, sitting in that cab. The modern music playing in the cab further separated Andres from that primitive and lonely structure. Finally, the car moved. There was a snowman in the neighbor's garden. After a few minutes, the car turned onto a ring road and began to pick up speed. Inside it swayed gently, and this calmed the man's nerves of steel. Could it be that literally in half an hour he would meet her? It could all have ended well, couldn't it? And what if there had been a mistake? He felt like his heart was going to pound out of his chest. She needed to relax. Maybe take back the words. Andrew unbuttoned his jacket. Adrenaline was making him hot. Thoughts swirling in swarms covered his eyes with memories, and he went back to the time when his life was divided into before and after. "Look, this girl is not your type," said the gray-haired father sitting at the oak table in his office. He had a folder with Sophia's file in front of him. "We'll find you a better match than that. Listen to yourself." The mother, who was pacing back and forth, couldn't stand it and ran to young Andrew. She collapsed beside him on the sofa, grabbing him by the arms. She held him in her arms, her voice sounding sharper than usual. "Look, Andres, you're in love now, it's understandable, but you mustn't make hasty decisions. Go for a walk, take her to the movies, but don't plan anything serious." "I will decide for myself." The boy tore his hands from his mother's grasp. "I love her." Father cocked his head to one side and rubbed his forehead wearily. "Do you realize you're going to ruin your whole life? She's an orphan. Think about it. She doesn't even know her parents' education. Now she's young and pretty, but over the years her character will become rude. Do you want a grumpy wife around you?" The older man tried to get to her mind, but did not realize that Andrew had long ago made up his mind. "Father, I beg you. Do not stand in my way." "What are you talking about, Andres?" Mom squinted her eyes. "Dad and I only want what's best for you. Listen to me, son. Before you know it, she'll be pregnant. And we raised you to be a responsible man. If you drop out of college and go to work to support your family, your whole future will be ruined. You'll end up as a longshoreman." The man leaned on the table and pointed his finger at Andres. "I'll take everything from you. No money until you finish this business. Remember what I tell you." He slapped the table with the palm of his hand. His mother merely pursed her lips in agreement. Andrew remembered how furious he had been when he left his parents' house. Already in the afternoon he had packed his bags, had taken Sophia in his arms, and they had gone to the outskirts of the city, to a small rented house on the shore of the lake. With a wooden floor, which they then filled with flour. It was the best months of their lives. They chatted seemingly 24 hours a day. About everything and nothing. They had no money then. Sophia worked part-time in the cafeteria after school, and Andres helped in the library cafeteria. The money wasn't much, but the main thing was that it was enough for rent and food. In their spare time, the couple crammed their books. Andrew was always amazed at how much she knew. It seemed impossible to find her without a book. He remembered her smiling face. And he remembered the bracelet. He had bought it for her as a gift at the jewelry store. The bracelet was as exquisite as Sophia. Andres would have liked to give her a gold one, but he barely had enough for this one, the silver one. Then the memory took him to the river. To the same reed-covered bank where he secretly went every year on the day of his death. "We are very sorry, young man, but we found your friend's things on the beach. We presume she drowned. Her body has not yet been found. A search is in progress." The man took off his cap. Several days passed until Sophia disappeared. The boy went to see all his friends, but no one had seen her. She did not show up at the apartment either. Andres did not know what to do. He went to the orphanage where the girl grew up, hoping to find her there, but she didn't show up either. The man remembered how he had run to the lake. There were several policemen on the shore. One was writing something down, another was carefully picking up Sophia's things with pliers. As soon as he reached the scene of the tragedy, the strong arms of a third policeman came around him from behind and calmed him down. "Hush, hush, young man. You'll spoil all the evidence. We are looking for her." Andres collapsed to the ground. Tears covered his eyes. Why had he gone to that lake? What could have happened? All his questions remained unanswered. During the following year, Andres did not remember himself because of grief. He drank. He had to take a leave of absence from high school. His parents consoled their son, but did not hide their quiet joy. He was disgusted to see them. They never found Sophia's body. And this broke his heart even more. Andres could not rest in peace, he had nowhere to go to her grave. There was no way to say goodbye. All he had left were a few photos and the shore of a lake. Over the years, the hole in his soul never fully healed. All those fleeting romances were like a band-aid stuck on a bleeding ulcer that had been bleeding for years. With them, his life seemed compassionate from the outside, but he was still that wounded beast. Perhaps it was only with Carla that he tried to create something resembling a relationship. His parents liked him very much. The girl was quiet and homely. But that had never mattered to him. Looking at her, he felt nothing. Like he was watching a boring TV show. He came to the conclusion that he was cruel to the girl and confessed his lack of feelings. 10 years passed, but Andrew never tried to start a family again. Andres opened a crack in the window and breathed in the fresh air. He tried to forget the painful memories. They had never found the body, had they? So she could still be alive? She could be. She could have lost her memory. Or she could have been kidnapped. Her troubled mind was running out of options. The man didn't know if she would recognize him, but he would definitely recognize her. He realized that Camila really did look like Sophia when she was young. Yes, of course. He noticed right away. And the names? Could it be a coincidence that the names were the same? Of course it's her. That's her. Andres smiled softly. He didn't want to chase away the good feeling. The car turned onto a bumpy road dotted with gravel. The wheels scraped wearily over the unfamiliar pavement. The driver slowed down, negotiating the potholes. Snow crunched underfoot and Andres nervously finished his cigarette. The cab flashed its red lights and rounded the corner at full speed. Andres was beginning to freeze when the front door finally opened. Camila peeked out from behind the door and waved to Andres, inviting him in. The cigarette flew into a trash can and through a cloud of smoke, the man headed toward his destination. Hello, Andres, he put a pair of worn-out flip-flops in front of him. Camila, are you all right? The man saw the girl's embarrassment and wanted to lighten the mood. He hung the jacket on one of the rusty hooks in the hallway and patted her on the shoulder. The house seemed even smaller on the inside than on the outside, but not without pleasure Andrew noticed that it was much cozier than his home. To the right of the foyer was a small kitchen. Camila invited him in and served him tea. Andres sat in a chair covered with a colorful cloak. It was clear that the hostess had sewn it herself. On the table was a bowl of donuts and sweets. On the opposite edge of the table was a large pile of newspapers. Camila had gone to look for her mother and had disappeared into the back room. Time stood still. Not knowing where to turn, the man picked up one of the newspapers. There was nothing interesting. News, advertisements, and horoscopes. A pen marked popular prescriptions for ailments. Behind Andres, heavy, shuffling footsteps could be heard. He did not turn around. He remained motionless. A female figure walked heavily around him, rested her arm on the table and sat heavily in the chair opposite. The aroma of tea mingled with that of medicine. The man looked up. His eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't her. His heart plummeted to the floor. In front of him sat a dark-haired, dark-skinned woman in her 50s. Her skin was a little reddish and grayish, and her face had dried out under the onslaught of the unbearable illness. Camila carefully draped a knitted shawl over the woman's shoulders. The stranger's brown eyes looked at the man with interest, as if studying him, testing his qualities. Hello. Andres' voice had never sounded so shy. He could barely move his lips. I didn't know what else to say. What a silly thing to say. Now he probably thinks I'm some kind of maniac. Camila, please leave us alone, honey. The woman gently stroked the girl's arm, I need to talk to this man. I'm sorry, my leg hurts so much. The woman stretched out her sore leg in front of her. She had a wide bandage on her knee. You'll have to forgive me, I think. Andrew picked up the words. The woman looked down the hall and made sure that Camilla had gone to her room. My name is Adriana. I know who you are. I knew right away. I am a friend of Sophia's. These words caught the man's attention. I'll tell you everything that happened, but please don't say anything now. Camilla doesn't know anything. He settled back in his chair and poured himself some tea. I met Sophia in our village 20 years ago. She came to work with us. We rented an apartment with her from a woman. She was a nice girl. We hit it off right away, although she didn't like to tell us much about herself. She was pregnant. I would ask her where the father was, but she wouldn't tell me anything. I wondered if something had happened. Maybe it's a dark story. Okay, I guess it's up to you. A couple or 3 months later, she opened up to me. She was living with a guy. Nice guy, she said, smart, knowledgeable. She loved him very much. Only, she said, her parents were against it. She wasn't the same as their son. They met with her several times, demanded she get out of his life. They even offered her money. They said it would ruin her life and rob her of her future. Of course, she fought back as best she could, but everything got worse. Her parents started threatening her, and she had just found out she was pregnant. Her parents, as Sophia said, hinted to her that anything could happen and they wouldn't find her, and who would look for her being an orphan. Well, she got scared and accepted their conditions. To save the child. So they made her pretend to drown. They told her to put her clothes on the shore of the lake. They forbade her to take anything from the house, so that no one would guess that she had run away. They gave her some money and moved on. So she is alive, whispered Andres, barely moving his lips. Adriana's words were like sharp daggers stabbing into his agitated conscience. What a fool I have been. Hence their satisfied faces. They had prepared everything and had seen me suffer. So Camilla is my daughter? Yes, the woman nodded and rubbed her sore knee. But where is Sophia? Is she alive? I really don't know, but I hope so. After Sophia gave birth, we settled in the country for good. We worked as milkmaids, or sewed pillowcases to order. A little later, when Camilla was 2 years old, we started going to the city to earn money. The pay was better there. We got jobs as maids, and at first everything went well. It wasn't easy work, of course, but the pay was decent. We left Camilla with our landlady. Sophia paid her, of course. But she got along well with Camilla. And she helped us a lot. And then we were sent to a new house to clean. The owners were fighting with each other. They were always fighting. All we had time to do was clean up the broken decorations. It was as if someone had died and they were dividing up the inheritance. You could tell there was something to divide up. Camilla appeared in the hallway. Are you all right? Shall I put more boiling water in the kettle? It's all right, sweetheart. Go sit in your room. The woman made sure the girl was gone and crouched down closer to Andrew. Anyway, one day I got sick. I got a fever and Sophia went to work alone. I almost lost my head. She was out for several days. There were no phones and no one to call. I don't know what happened. Camilla crying, missing her mother, and me barely recovering. She only came back a few days later. White as a sheet. Not alone, but in the company of detectives. They turned the house upside down, looking for something. I approached Sophia to find out what had happened. She was shaking like an autumn leaf, poor thing. She said a murder had happened in front of her while she was cleaning the house. The owners were arguing, as usual, and then a scuffle started, and Sophia pulled away when she heard the noise, thinking that maybe it was necessary to separate. There were two sons fighting. Without realizing it, one shot the other in the head. She fainted. She woke up when she was awakened by the police. She had the gun in her hands, but it was covered in blood. Anyway, she was set up. I went to the courthouse. They made it look like I robbed them. They broke into the safe. Apparently, they were looking for our jewelry, but they found nothing. Their lawyer is a real bastard. I could tell he was bought. He didn't defend her at all. In the end, he got 20 years. So, the woman closed her eyes and mumbled with her hands. I didn't turn Camilla in, of course. I started to educate her myself. She doesn't even remember Sophia anymore. She thinks I'm her mother. So Sophia is in prison now? I don't know, to be honest. He wrote for the first few years and then disappeared. I sent her many letters, but there was no reply. If only she was alive. I even wanted to hire a detective once. I saved some money. But Camilla got sick that year, so I had to spend it all. The woman grabbed Andres by the elbow, pulling him out of his stupor. I see you're a decent man. I'm sure you want to find Sophia. I only ask you one thing. He leaned close to the businessman's face and looked him in the eyes. If you find out anything about her, let me know. It is very important to me. Andrew stood in the street and looked down at the pile of snow, but saw nothing in front of him. A lit cigarette smoked slowly in his hands and a long column of ash fell on the pile of white snow. The information he had received was slowly processing and turning his view of the world upside down. His beloved had not drowned. She could be alive. She has a daughter. To grasp it all seemed impossible. When he entered his house, he didn't realize for a second where he was. The apartment was clean and the kitchen smelled like home cooking. He had already forgotten about the housework. Likewise, someone had forgotten about his Sophia, who had been set up. Taking off his boots, Andres carefully pulled a folded piece of paper from the inside pocket of his jacket. Inside was written the name with his surname, the prison number and the article. A few days later, Andres learned that Sophia was alive. The private detective told him that she had been paroled 5 years earlier, but had stayed in the settlement. No planes flew there, but it was possible to get there by train. The nearest train was leaving in a few days. Andres could no longer think about work. After apologizing to his partners, he said he would skip the other scheduled meetings and left everything in the hands of his team. Every evening, the employees sent him brief reports on how the day had gone. He was very proud of his employees. After all, he had succeeded in creating a dedicated team. But they were not his real family. Andres rushed to share with Adriana the joy that Sophia was alive. The woman was crying with happiness. Unfortunately, he found her in an even worse state than the last time he had seen her. That day she could no longer get out of bed. It was hard for Andres to see her suffer. He called his acquaintances, the smiling nurses at the clinic, for payment, and soon a team headed by a top-notch doctor arrived. The doctor examined her and said that it was necessary to operate, but that it was possible to recover her. Andres did not hesitate for a moment. Adriana was admitted to the clinic that same day. The doctors did some tests and set the date for the operation. Andres paid for a separate room, which was like a small apartment, and Camila could sleep directly with her adoptive mother. The girl was immensely happy and repeated over and over again that she didn't even know how to thank him. She still didn't know the truth about her origins, and Adriana convinced Andres to postpone the big talk and find Sophia first and talk to her. It was a very good idea. Andres decided to take her advice. The train was banging its wheels and swaying. It had been a long time since Andres had traveled by train. Cities and towns passed by the window. Andres had no neighbors. The train would arrive at the right station in the morning. From there he would go to a settlement and meet the woman for whom he had kept his love for 20 years. Another platform passed by the window and disappeared into the darkness. If only life were that easy. He was past a bad time. What would he leave behind? The years of loneliness? The fleeting love affairs? Or perhaps he would be the first to send his parents, whose abusive love had broken the lives of several people at once, into darkness. The conductor called softly to the first-class carriage and offered tea. Andrew opened the door and noted with delight that tea was still served in faceted glasses with carved iron coasters. As a matter of habit, Andres got up at 7 in the morning. Over the years, he no longer even needed an alarm clock. Soon the doors of the train station closed behind him and cab drivers competed with each other to lure him into their car. When he called the address, the mustachioed driver, whom he picked at random from the crowd, looked at him in surprise. He looked puzzled, wondering what such a respectable man was looking for in that godforsaken place. Andres returned the gesture with his head, showing that he had not misheard him and that he would not give him any explanations. Andres entered the cafeteria where they had arranged to meet Sofia. He had not yet had a chance to talk to her. But the person in charge of the meeting promised him that she would pass on all the information to Sofia and that she would meet him in the cafeteria. The small room was decorated with lightwood on the inside and the entire space was flooded with sunlight. The room smelled of sweets, coffee, and milk. Andrew remembered his first visit to the candy store. How long it had been, and he remembered it as if it were yesterday. Sofia had been there. She was sitting at a wooden table, looking out the window. She was wearing a modest beige dress with a high collar. A simple brown jacket, unnecessarily light for the time of year, hung over the back of a chair. Andrew froze. It was her. Alive. In front of him. Sofia said shyly on her lips. Andres, said the woman with a trembling voice and threw an alarming look at Andres. I can't believe it. Tears were running down her cheeks. She was perplexed, as if trying to believe it wasn't a dream, and held out a slender hand to him. A shadow of doubt crossed her face. It was as if he were a ghost who, with any false move, could disappear and leave her alone again. Andres could say no more. He took her in his arms and kissed her blonde hair, crying with happiness. The whole world disappeared for him. You haven't changed. Andrew wiped away a tear. Sofia, I know everything. I found Adriana and she told me everything. I'm so sorry. Sofia, our daughter, is incredible. I know her. I came for you, you have to go back. The woman's blue eyes filled with tears again and she took a white napkin from the table to wipe them away. Andres, she doesn't even remember me anymore. Why does she need a mother who didn't know where she came from? Unfortunately, I have nothing to give her. I love her very much, Andres, but I belong here now. I have spent many years here. And outside the settlement, I am nothing. My youth is gone. He raised his hands. And I have no education, no profession, nothing. I'm just a burden on their shoulders. Sofia, it doesn't matter. I have everything, you don't have to work, and Camila. She is wonderful. She'll understand everything. She wants to study art history, can you imagine? She got in on her own. She's so like you. The woman was crying with her face resting on her hands on the table. The middle-aged waitress did not show her face. Apparently, such scenes were not uncommon here. There were no other guests in the cafeteria. The conversation was not easy. They continued talking well into the night. Andres tried to convince Sofia to go with him, but she did not agree. Then he decided to play a card and assured her that if she didn't go with him, he would have to move here himself to be near her. And tell Camilla all about it, then she would want to come too. The words had an effect on the woman. After much deliberation, Sofia finally agreed to give it a try. Life outside the usual place frightened her, but the desire to see her daughter, to see Adriana, who had not abandoned her child, was stronger than a woman. Sofia asked to wait for Andres at the entrance so she could gather her things, but when she came out her thin arms were empty. Wouldn't she go after all? But then, the man saw the beloved small bag over her shoulder. Sofia said she didn't want to take anything from this life to the new one. Andrew liked the idea. Of course, the years would not return, but dragging with him the heavy weight of injustice would also be cruel, in his opinion. The return trip passed in silence. The couple looked out the train window, carrying the years of hardship and suffering into the past. Camila was impressed by the story of her fate. Adriana, Sofia and Andres were sitting next to the girl at the round tea table in Andres' spacious living room. Adriana's leg was still bandaged, but the doctors had already allowed her to return home. She was recovering quickly. Even before the big talk with Camila, Sofia and Andres visited the woman in the hospital. Camila had been sent to the mall to buy something for her mother, which meant the seniors had time to talk to each other. Adriana and Sofia cried when they saw each other and hugged each other tightly. When their emotions calmed down, the women decided how to tell Camila everything and, more importantly, how they would live their lives now. Andres suggested that they move in with him. He thought it would be a great idea. He told them he had a big house with enough room for all of them. Camila would have to go back to school and continue her studies. The women were discouraged by this proposal, but accepted it after thinking about it. This way, Camila would also be able to spend time with her new parents, and Adriana, who had raised her as her own daughter, would be by her side. Andres' life has changed dramatically. 6 months ago he was a lonely man with no one to care for but his staff. Now he has a family. A daughter, a beloved wife and a loyal friend. His house was filled with voices and life. It no longer seemed like a plastic fake to him. The women had decorated the house with little things, and it had become a real cozy family nest. And in the place of honor in the living room, they had placed a marble pedestal at Andrew's request. On a green velvet cushion, under the glass, lay a small object that had completely changed the lives of the inhabitants of the house, a silver bracelet. Camila was able to re-enroll in high school and was preparing for the next school year. Throughout the summer, they attended friendly exhibitions and theatrical performances. Andres and Sofia could not get enough of their daughter. Adriana was glad that her daughter's life had changed qualitatively. Now she was not worried about her future. If you liked the story, please like and subscribe to the channel.